The diner was unusually crowded that evening, the clatter of plates and low hum of conversation mixing with the faint scent of coffee and fried food. Sophia, the waitress, moved quickly between tables, a practiced smile on her face, though her mind was elsewhere. Her hands shook slightly as she balanced a tray loaded with mugs of steaming coffee, glancing nervously toward the door every few seconds. Outside, the rain had started again, darkening the streets and mirroring the tension coiling in her chest. Her ex, a man she had hoped never to see again, appeared in the doorway, scanning the diner with an expression that made her stomach tighten. He spotted her instantly, his eyes narrowing with that familiar possessive glare that had haunted her dreams for months. Sophia froze mid-step, the tray tilting slightly in her hands, and a few patrons turned to notice the sudden tension. She swallowed hard, trying to think of a way out without drawing more waitress set on Billionaire's lap to escape her ex. He murmured, "Play along, I'll protect you." Tension. From across the diner, a man in a tailored suit leaned against the counter, sipping a glass of water and observing the scene with calm, calculated interest. His presence was commanding, quiet, yet impossible to ignore. He exuded wealth and control without a word. Sophia knew instinctively that if she could reach him, he might be able to help. Her pulse quickened as she adjusted the tray, the plan forming in her mind in a heartbeat. As her ex took a step closer, his expression darkening, Sophia made her move. She dashed toward the man at the counter, her tray trembling violently, and without thinking, she leapt onto his lap in a desperate bid to escape. The diner went silent for a split second, the clatter of dishes and low murmurs fading into background noise. Patrons stared, some in shock, some in curiosity, as the billionaire looked down at her, surprise flickering across his composed features. "Play along," he murmured under his breath, his hand steadying her back. "I'll protect you." His voice was low, controlled, and carried a weight of authority that made Sophia relax just slightly. She clutched at his suit jacket, feeling the strength in his posture and the calm assurance radiating from him. The ex hesitated, his anger momentarily disrupted by the audacity of the scene before him. Sophia's eyes met the billionaire's, a silent question passing between them. He nodded once, subtle but firm, and she understood she wasn't alone in this. With his presence behind her, the oppressive weight of her ex's gaze felt less suffocating. She drew a shaky breath, letting herself sink slightly into the warmth and reassurance of the stranger beneath her. The ex finally broke the silence, his voice sharp and demanding. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The entire diner seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the confrontation to erupt. Sophia clung to the billionaire's arm, her voice barely a whisper. I don't want trouble." The billionaire's gaze flicked to the man, sharp and commanding. "Step back," he said, voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. The ex froze, his bravado faltering as the man's presence filled the space like a shield. Sophia watched, amazed, as the tension in the room shifted entirely, the power dynamics rewritten in an instant. "Are you done?" the billionaire asked quietly, his eyes never leaving the ex. There was no anger, only a dangerous calm that made the man step back, unsure. Sophia's ex gritted his teeth, but finally turned on his heel and stalked out, leaving a trail of murmurs in his wake. The diner slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though a few patrons still cast curious glances toward the table. Sophia slid off the billionaire's lap, her legs unsteady, but her heart racing with relief. He straightened his jacket, glancing down at her with an amused yet calculating smile. "You might want to be more careful," he said, his voice low, almost teasing. Thank you," Sophia stammered, still catching her breath. "I didn't know what else to do." He offered her a hand, helping her steady herself. "Sometimes the best option is the boldest one," he said, his eyes locking with hers in a way that sent a strange mix of fear and curiosity through her. As she took her seat, still slightly trembling, The billionaire returned to his counter, though he kept a watchful eye on her. The storm outside continued, the rain pelting the windows like tiny drums. But inside, there was a strange, tentative peace. Sophia exhaled slowly, feeling a small measure of safety for the first time in months. The minutes stretched, each one filled with subtle, unspoken tension. Sophia found herself stealing glances at the man who had just saved her, noticing the quiet confidence in his movements. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it carried weight, drawing attention without effort. She realized she didn't even know his name. "Sit somewhere safer," he finally murmured, nodding toward a booth at the back. She obeyed, her pulse still racing, and noticed him watching over her shoulder. There was something protective in the way he observed, a silent promise that she was no longer vulnerable. As the evening wore on, Sophia found herself opening up slightly, telling him in small fragments about her situation. He listened, never interrupting, letting her words spill out like water onto dry ground. His reactions were minimal, but precise. A nod, a slight arch of an eyebrow, a quiet word of reassurance when she needed it. By the time the diner started to thin out, Sophia realized she felt lighter. The oppressive weight of her ex's presence lifted entirely. The billionaire's calm, controlled demeanor had given her something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. Not just physical, but the kind that reaches deep into the corners of the soul. She glanced at him as she prepared to leave, a nervous question in her eyes. I don't even know your name," she admitted softly. He smiled faintly, tilting his head. "Names aren't important right now. Just remember that you're not alone." The storm outside began to ease, the rain slowing to a gentle drizzle. Sophia stepped into the cool night air, the tension in her shoulders gradually releasing. She looked back once at the diner, then at the man who had become an unexpected protector. And in that fleeting glance, she realized that life could shift in a single moment, that courage sometimes came in the form of jumping into the unknown. She smiled faintly, her heart lighter than it had been in months, ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the diner earlier than usual, wiping the condensation off the windows as she tried to shake off the lingering tension from the previous night. Her thoughts kept returning to the man who had protected her, the one whose presence seemed to radiate calm and control. She didn't even know his name, yet the memory of his touch, steady and reassuring, lingered in a corner of her mind. The thought made her stomach flutter nervously, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. He arrived shortly after, casually sliding into the booth near the back, his presence immediately drawing her attention, despite her best efforts to remain composed. She tried to focus on her work, taking orders and refilling coffee cups, but every glance she stole at him reminded her of how safe she felt with him around. The ex who had tormented her in the past was nowhere to be seen, and for the first time in months, the weight of fear had lifted slightly. "Good morning," he said quietly, his voice low, but somehow carrying a warmth that filled the space between them. Sophia looked up, forcing a smile, though she felt the tremor in her chest. "Morning," she replied softly, trying to sound casual, though the slight quiver in her voice betrayed her nervousness. He nodded once, his gaze sharp and observant, as if he could see right through her carefully constructed walls. The lunch crowd began to trickle in, and Sophia found herself moving quickly between tables, but she could sense him watching her, a silent sentinel ensuring her safety. His presence was subtle, never intrusive, yet it offered a strange comfort she couldn't quite put into words. Each time she glanced at him, he offered the faintest of nods, a wordless acknowledgement that he was there for her, that she wasn't alone anymore. Hours passed, and the diner gradually emptied, leaving just the two of them in the dim light of the early afternoon. Sophia finally dared to approach him, setting down a cup of coffee she had prepared for him. "You didn't have to stay?" she said softly, her voice almost trembling as she looked at him. He smiled faintly, shaking his head. I wanted to. You shouldn't have to face things alone. She took a deep breath, letting herself absorb his words, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over her. I've never had someone like you in my life, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He studied her for a long moment, then leaned back, letting the silence linger between them. Finally, he said, maybe that's because you've been looking in the wrong places. People who care. They don't always make themselves obvious. Sophia felt a warmth rise in her chest, a mix of relief and something unfamiliar, anticipation perhaps. She realized she had been so focused on escaping her past that she hadn't allowed herself to notice kindness when it appeared. The man before her wasn't just protecting her physically. He was showing her that trust and connection were still possible. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the diner, Sophia found herself gathering the courage to speak again. Why do you help me? You don't even know me. His gaze softened, a rare vulnerability flickering across his features. Because I've seen what it's like to feel powerless, he said quietly. And sometimes, when you have the ability to help, you don't ask questions. You just do it. Her chest tightened, emotions churning as she realized the depth of his words. They weren't just about protecting her from her ex. They were about giving her a chance to reclaim a sense of safety, control, and dignity she had long been denied. She swallowed, nodding slowly, unable to find the right words to capture the gratitude and awe she felt. The diner's door jingled, and Sophia glanced up reflexively, half expecting to see her ex. But it was only a delivery man, the mundane intrusion oddly comforting after the emotional intensity of the day. She returned her gaze to him, finding the same calm presence, and felt an unfamiliar sense of hope. Perhaps life wasn't about running from the past. Perhaps it was about learning when to accept help and trust again. Hours melted away, and the diner emptied completely, leaving them in quiet solitude. He finally spoke again, his voice low but steady. You did well today, he said, nodding toward her. She felt a rush of pride, though it was tempered by humility. I didn't feel like I could, she admitted softly. But you made me believe I could. He leaned back, offering a small, enigmatic smile. Sometimes it just takes one person to remind you of your own strength, he said. Sophia looked at him, the words settling in her mind, heavy with meaning. For the first time in years, she felt seen, truly seen, not for what she could do for others, but for who she was. The night wore on, and the rain began again, soft against the diner windows. Sophia gathered her apron and prepared to leave, but he caught her hand gently. Wait, he said, his tone almost tender. You're not done yet. Don't walk through life carrying fear alone. Let someone in. Her throat tightened, tears she hadn't realized she was holding pricking at her eyes. I don't know how, she whispered. He gave her a faint, encouraging nod. Then start small. One step at a time. She smiled through the tears, finally allowing herself to believe that perhaps things could change, that the darkness of her past didn't have to dictate the entirety of her future. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of something fragile and new, trust, hope, and maybe even love. As she stepped into the rain, the cool droplets soaking her hair and clothes, she glanced back at the diner one last time. He was there, watching, his posture relaxed but unwavering, a silent guardian in the chaos of her life. Sophia felt the tension in her shoulders release, replaced with a strange exhilaration. She wasn't alone anymore. Later, when she told a friend about the events of the night, she laughed through the lingering fear. I sat on a billionaire's lap in a diner to escape my ex, she said, shaking her head. The friend stared, wide-eyed, and Sophia added with a wry smile. And he said I was brave. Imagine that. Weeks passed, and their bond deepened quietly. He became a constant presence, attending to small gestures. A ride home, a protective glance, a comforting word when memories of her ex resurfaced. Sophia began to trust again, slowly, tentatively, learning that safety and affection could coexist. One evening, as the diner closed and the streets glistened with rain, he offered a soft, sincere smile. "You've come a long way," he said. Sophia returned the smile, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. "Not without you," she admitted. He shook his head gently. "You did it yourself," he said. "I only reminded you who you were." The words settled between them, quiet but profound. For Sophia, it was the beginning of a life no longer defined by fear, but by courage, trust, and the possibility of something extraordinary. As she left the diner that night, she glanced back once more, catching his steady gaze. She knew that whatever storms lay ahead, she would face them differently, with someone by her side who had seen her brokenness and stayed, who had helped her find strength in herself. And for the first time, she felt truly unafraid.